Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jared and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supersede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Reinsurance Podcast. It is the beginning-ish part of the year. We've recently had the renewals, and that got us thinking about what it must be like to be a smaller cedent who is dealing with the same challenges as everybody else, but on a different scale, quite literally.
Yeah.
Excited by today's topic?
It's super excited about today's topic. I think a while back, we've talked about a number of times about the weight that the U.S. market has on the reinsurance industry broadly. But I think that same kind of dynamic happens with large and small cedents. So much attention gets applied to, well, what is like AIG doing, and what are the dozen biggest reinsurers in the world. They disproportionately move the needle, but they get the attention that they capture not only from the brokers and the reinsurers, but the market as a whole, sort of at the detriment of everybody else. There's 7,000 insurance companies worldwide, right? All of whom buy reinsurance, most of whom do it at the sort of same renewal fees as everybody else. But they don't seem to get the press coverage in reinsurance news and the insider that everyone else does. And we wanted to spend some time giving our love to the smaller cedents in the world.
Indeed. So picture this, if you're not a small cedent already. You're facing, as usual, the barrage of renewals that you need to get through. Might actually only be about 10 or more or less renewals that you actually have to get done. But unlike many large cedents where you've got an entire dedicated ceded re-team, perhaps it's just a couple of people, or perhaps it's just you, or perhaps you're also the chief underwriting officer and it's your job to buy reinsurance, or something even more complicated.
Well, I think we can start a step earlier in the journey is the role reinsurance plays for cedents of all sizes and scale. And I think reinsurance arguably is more important for small cedents.
Existential, one might say.
Right. It's certainly critical for their ability to sort of grow. Like if you're trying to grow as an insurance company, we've talked about this before, but you grow into new products, new geographies, and all those different sort of routes to growth, as well as expand what you're currently doing and try to win more clients there. But the role of reinsurance is like essential in your ability to sort of add something new to your suite. If you just do homeowners, like going into motor, or going into small business cover, like the only way you can effectively do that is by leveraging reinsurance partnerships. And so when you think about the smaller the cedent, the more likely they have growth ambitions on the horizon. Reinsurance is like critical to their ability to do that. So it's like the genesis of what they need to do. It's also really important as a source of capital. We've talked a bit about reinsurance as capital, but when you're a really small insurance company, getting an A rating from AM Best or S&P or A+ or AA is fundamental in your ability to win larger accounts and grow the book that way. So it's taken for granted when you're Generali or someone, you're going to have A ratings because you're one of the biggest firms. So those are two main reasons around the criticality of reinsurance as a small cedent.
A third, I would say, is fragility. Right?
Yeah.
At this point in time in your journey, you're not going to have as much sophistication in the way that you manage portfolio optimization and making sure that you are going to avoid large or complex losses or sequences of losses that could put you in a position not just of an earnings event, but even a going concern event where you could end up finding yourself overexposed to whatever starting point your portfolio had when you set up the company. If you're currently a regional player or a local player or a monoline player, that brings with it systemic risks, which are much more easily protected by a diversified reinsurer than they are by that individual monoline player.
Yeah. So with that as the scene set, you're now, as you pointed out earlier, a team of one or two people going into the world, carrying the weight of your company's sort of growth ambitions on you to buy reinsurance. in the meeting, I picture, this is not how it works, but I wish it was. But I picture it like everyone's sitting in a chair waiting outside the broker's office, right? Like in interviews, right? And next to you on one side is, AIG, and next to you on the other side is Liberty Mutual. And you're there with, 50th of the balance sheet that they have going, oh, I hope they get excited by what I've got to show them. But you're going into a renewal season with everybody else. And you're trying to somehow convince the brokers to give you the attention around your structure and get the priority and access to capital that they're getting and the amounts that you need from the best reinsurers on the planet. And what we want to spend some time around is understanding why that's difficult, and then leaning into a bit more of what can we do? How do we sort of get there going? That guy next to me in that chair doesn't have what I've got in my little portfolio. It's that kind of dynamic, because capital is still finite. You're going to have to compete for it. The brokers have finite amount of time to evaluate and structure programs, and much of that deprioritization, if you could call it that, stems from the fact that this is an industry that needs to make money.
Yeah,
and the bigger accounts are more lucrative. If you're placing a $500 billion of coverage and protection across 5 major cedents in a property cat zone, the returns on that is bigger if those deals are good, right? And small regional cedents, monoline books don't seem to generate the premium income that gets the reinsurers as excited or the brokers as excited, and thus get sort of deprioritized in the process unless they stand out.
Yeah, I was thinking about this in the context of, so we did a Insurance Institute London 1-1 renewals lecture with Tom Wakefield, and that was brilliant. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I'd highly recommend it. But the key concept that came out of that was, to get a good result in the renewals, you've got to go to them with a narrative that you can back up with great data. And that narrative has to explain why you're worth people's time. I think that's 10 times, if not 100 times more important if you're a small player. Because to your point around brokers and reinsurers having bigger fish to fry, you not only have fewer resources internally, you do have fewer resources externally as well. I was trying to come up with an appropriate analogy for this earlier on the way over to the studio, but if you think of it almost like a menu, right? AIG and these, sorry, AIG, I didn't mean to keep on picking on you. And insert large insurer here, one of these big global players. They're like mains on a restaurant menu, right? You're gonna have to choose a main, because otherwise you'll be hungry. That's why the whole reason you went out for dinner. But
not here for the starters.
well, exactly. And then you get some smaller players or some medium players who are like starters or desserts, which are a bit more optional. And then you get like snacks or things on the side which are like entirely optional, right? It will not move the book of a major broker or a major reinsurer if they do or don't help you out, or if they do or don't write your business. You're the edamame of this whole operation, right? Yeah, that's the reality of the situation that we're dealing with. So if ever there were a moment where you needed to make the description of you as good as possible and to back that up with a good delivery, that's the case to do it. You can't just be edamame. You've got to be the soy-glazed edamame with a sprinkling of Himalayan salt.
Ooh, I do love some Himalayan
I don't know. And you've got evidence.
Yeah. The analogy that I thought of, and we don't do analogy battles anymore, so this is just an
informal, a friendly.
But was one of like having an accounting partner or something. If you're an accountant and we'll shift industries for the sake of not attacking any more of our cedents, but you're like Disney. You're going to have complicated accounting because you've got several different revenue streams and international businesses, and you're going to be complicated. But if you're a small business owner and you try to go to one of the big accounting shops and everyone does their accounting the same time of year because it's the end of year accounts that happen, and you sort of go to them with a sort of cliched box full of receipts. And that accountant's role, part of the role is to advise you around what the best tax strategies of your business is. But if you're just this little business and you're saying, well, here's my complete mess full of receipts in this box, help me out. Like a reinsurance broker, like they're going to get your job done. They're going to get your accounts filed. But is the primary use of that relationship to file them? or is it to be more strategic around what you're trying to achieve as an organization and as a business and how they can be a sort of catalyst for your growth? And by contrast, if you came to them with incredibly well organized and filed things and actually putting together the accounts took them mere moments, they'd have more willingness and appetite to spend more time on helping you think about the objectives of what you're trying to do as a business and how they can leverage various sort of structures of law and tax environments to allow you to achieve those goals. I think that's an incredibly similar dynamic where that accountant doesn't not want to give you any time, but the smaller you are, the less appetite they have to dig through your shoebox full of receipts and try to navigate the different currencies they might be in or whatever, right? But if you make that job, that part of it easier for those partners, you'll see them become better partners for you.
So if I were to translate this back to reinsurance, the challenge facing smaller cedents is that not only have they got fewer resources internally, they've also got fewer resources externally in the form of their partners who've got other larger clients that they're going to be dealing with. So somehow you've got to figure out a way to be very, very prepared and organized internally such that when you go to your brokers, to your reinsurers, it's easy for them to allocate a disproportionate amount of time towards supporting you such that you can then go out to market with the narrative that's going to grab the attention of and earn the interest of those big partners who otherwise could just take or leave your business.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's getting the most out of them, right? And the smaller you are, the more every cost matters in almost all businesses, right? And if you're saying, well, we're going to give 15% of the brokerage is sort of what the brokers might get 10 in the U.S. or similar. If that money's being spent, and you as a cedent are saying, I'm happy for that spend, that broker value to be done on cleaning my data, it doesn't feel like you're getting the most that broker's capable of giving you. And I think that's the real value that's being left on the table by cedents who think about this as my broker does that work. That is the value that you want to extract from them. You work with many of the biggest brokers in the world, and the value that you want to extract from that relationship is they sorted your data out. To me, that doesn't feel like it's the right math for smaller cedents to do. The other thing that kind of jumps out with that is what is the message that sends to the market and your reinsurers when you have it where when they're asking about your data, you sort of go, my broker does most of that. Well, how is this like? Well, the broker has to answer all the questions. Yeah. If we again remove to another sort of business context, if you're doing that and you don't have any real idea how your portfolio comes together, the only way you understand how the structures and the amount of business you wrote for different bandings, the only way you understood what that looked like at the end of the year was from the work the broker did to sort of take the data you gave them and sort of organize it back and say, here's the amount of business you wrote in these various bandings and how your triangles are developing. That would give. I wouldn't be thrilled in an industry that's so heavily reliant on relationships. I would much prefer knowing that the cedent they do this every quarter, every half year, and they sort of have a really, really clear view as to here's our reinsurance strategy, here's how our book is developing and building over the course of the year to align with that, and here's the corrections we've made throughout the year. Like that would give me a lot more confidence in your ability to be a good partner of mine as a reinsurer. So all of those things sort of are pressing against and creating this sort of headwind that small cedents can face.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're a reinsurer looking at it the other way around, you're seeking a sprinkling of small cedents, I guess.
Yeah.
You're looking at the long line in the beauty contest almost of who you're going to choose. I completely agree with you. You're going to look at things that are quicker to assess than having to go into all of the box of papers as you described it, right? Yep. You're going to be like, oh, well, this person actually gets their portfolio and clearly has spent the time thinking about where they want to set retentions, where they want to think about expanding, they've got a growth plan and clearly they've got numbers to back it up. They are using their broker actually to negotiate a better deal with me, and I respect that. Not, if I think back to when I was an underwriter and I would think about the accounts that would strike my interest, they'd have really compelling narratives and data to support that narratives. I remember we had a client in the US that did grain towers, I think it was, as their main business. And so they would be able to evidence effectively our business is built of grain towers that are made, specifically to withstand wind events. So as much as, we've got this amount of premium in windy states, we are protected in these different ways thanks to the nature of our business. Also, we know at any given time how full those grain towers are and how likely, they are to be affected, and we price for that accordingly and so on. And just as a reinsurer, as an underwriter, you're like, these guys really get their business. And here's all the data backing up every word that they're saying. And that makes me want to partner with them. And it also makes me think, if I have them in my, a bit like, you don't want to order all the same thing from that menu. When you're looking at all the choices, you're like, they would differentiate my portfolio too, because they think differently. And they can evidence how they're thinking differently. It's not just talk. That's really attractive, I think, to a reinsurance underwriter.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that time as an underwriter, everything's starting to land on your desk over the course of a week, maybe two. And so it's really important that they look at the submission come in from you and go, ooh, actually, let me jump on that one, because I know it's a client you like, the data's organized, they have a lot of, you're curious to see how that book has evolved from what you saw last year.
You get really invested in it, genuinely. You start to think, I'm excited for that submission to land so I can see how they're doing. I'm excited to catch up with them during the year to hear how they're doing. I want to see, the thing they told me they were going to work on during the next year. How's it come to fruition? What's been the result of the initiative, based on what they told me was going to happen. And
there's the cedents that are really small and everything's a mess and it lands and you go,
not touching that one. Can't be bothered.
Try to find some time towards the end of the week to get to that one, but it doesn't excite you to jump in on it, right? You're like, the shoebox full of chaos is here, right?
Well, and to the point where if you've got two equally sized cedents, that come and they want me to put down a 10% line, let's say, I might actually say, I'd rather do 15% on the one that I like and maybe 5% on your worse. Walk away from that one and do 20% on the others. Same amount of premium income, much more confidence about which one I want to be a long-term partner with. But it all comes from that clear preparation, investment in doing things well, using brokers sensibly, and building, much more compelling narratives that tell me exactly why they are doing what they're doing and showing me the evidence for how they've been able to do it successfully.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about when one of the challenges or one of the result of having bad data put together for large cedents is the decreased line size that the reinsurers will make available, right? They're more than capable to provide a 15 or 20% line, but because there's uncertainty in the data, all they're really going to give you is 8 or 10% or something like this. That same dynamic, as you point out, is absolutely happening on smaller cedents. They're not just saying, because you're not so big, we'll still do a whole, this amount. The reinsurers are always evaluating what amount of risk are they willing to take on their balance sheet for those various exposures that they have, and the lack of confidence that they have, both in terms of what the book is doing, but how you run that business is impacting that. So if they're not getting that confidence from the way the cedents present themselves in the market, they will be given smaller offerings. And that becomes, again, we talked about the importance of reinsurance for smaller insurance companies. The more that happens, the more likely they're left, hung out to dry. They're scrambling to fill a program, or they're taking capital from less rated reinsurers, or they're forced to increase their retentions or take cover on the top. All these things work to their detriment, and so that's the challenge that the insurers are sort of left as they go into the market.
It reminds me of you hear about young entrepreneurs and so on, and they've got to pitch their business to somebody, and If you turn up and it's, not even got a deck or similar, you haven't got a budget or a model or anything to show why you think your idea is going to be good, you're just going to get laughed out of the room, right? But then people who really put in the time and build like a really crisp and beautiful presentation, you can picture it in the movie, when somebody turns up and they're like, oh, and this is how it's going to work, and you see all the investors clapping and like, yay, we want to invest. A huge part of that is how you turn up and how you present yourself. And I think maybe what people don't realize actually a lot of the time is that thanks in large part to software and the availability of software nowadays, we're actually getting to a point where smaller cedents can also show up in the same way as large ones without having to, build anything in-house or do anything crazy internally. You could turn up, for example, now as a small cedent if you invest in the right software. By the way, there may be a recommendation here that Jared can give you in a second. And actually present your information in the same way as a global insurance company would, and have the same credibility, the same layout, the same style when it comes to pitching your business to the market as titanic players much larger than yourself. I don't think many smaller cedents have realized that yet, and they're still turning up with like, here's my 1,000-tab color-coded spreadsheet, with lots of manual annotations and scribblings out almost, that just cause you to groan as an underwriter. You look at it and you're like, oh, here we go again. Yeah. Can anybody remember where they hid this thing last time? Yeah. Or does anybody know what currency this is? Or can we try and figure out why the rate table is different to every other carrier that we work with? And there's probably people who think that clinging on to the way they've always done it is the thing that's getting them the results they want. There's like this weird psychological thing that happens where it's like, oh, I've got to do it this way because I did it last year this way, and if I change, then the reinsurers will penalize me. Like, no. The reinsurers curse you every single year when you come up in your own special way that's different to every other client they work with. Ideal scenario for an underwriter is like, oh, it's formatted the same as everybody else's, so I just press a button and it works. Versus, looks like I'm spending today manually kind of trailing my way through these spreadsheets and trying to copy and paste out the bit I need just for the sake of an edamame bean. That's the kind of situation that you find.
And we laugh, but they will do that assessment. They'll look at it and they'll say the amount of work that goes into this account that's going to generate single-digit millions in revenue for the bit. Those are, as for a reinsurer and smaller for the brokers, it's easy for them to make the decision that this is a huge amount of work, but it's one of the biggest accounts in the world. They don't get that same assessment when they work with small cedents. They see it as what is the trade-off of doing these deals. We've even talked to reinsurers that tend to ignore deals below certain thresholds because they don't have the bandwidth to justify doing that. And that's because the data work is just as painful as or worse than bigger accounts. So.
Or the confidence to take the risk, right? Like as in, if you imagine a scenario where the confidence decreases the smaller the cedent is, then actually the worthwhileness, which is not a good word, but you know what I mean, the value of taking on a small cedent who gives you low confidence about how they're going to perform is like exponentially worse, right? You're sat going like, not only is this going to bring me a very small amount of revenue, but in exchange they're going to give me a very large amount of uncertainty about how they're going to perform. If somebody you take on with a slightly disappointing or misleading level of data display to you turns out then down the road to have a massive loss, you're going to look so silly. It's like, everybody's going to be looking at you and be like, why did you work with that small cedent? Why did you take them on? Like, best case, they were going to make you like 20 grand, if they ran at a 95 combined or something for the year, which is what looked likely. And now they've run at 150 and you've cost us most of our profit that we would otherwise. It's really got to be compelling for an underwriter to say, I want you in my portfolio. And they need to be able to see how you fit against the rest of the portfolio, again, which is difficult if you give them weird, differently structured information. Well,
and the focus, and even when we were sort of at this most nascent stages of our business, thinking about what we wanted to do, there was always this recognition that software in the modern world democratizes access to tools regardless of size, right? In the same way, I think in probably one of the earliest episodes of the podcast, we talked about the excitement for starting a company now is high because it's so much easier to have an AWS stack and all these little tools. That means V1 can be spun up with very little cost compared to what it would have been 15, 20 years ago. That same thing is true with small cedents. There's access to software that lets you have sort of best-in-class data and partner with your brokers and reinsurers in a way that only the biggest companies have been able to do in the past, regardless of your size. And the idea that you're either A, offloading all of that work and that portfolio management to another party, which doesn't always look the best for you as a business, or B, trying to do all of these things in-house and manually build things out and structure your own sort of tools with a much smaller team when you could just leverage software that has the integrations built in, that's already plugged in connectivity to the parties that you care about, that help you do all of that work faster and more accurately than you've done before. Like that democratization of access to technology is the way technology works these days, allowing you to be able to do the things that were previously only available to the largest, most sophisticated companies who could spend tens of millions a year internally on stuff.
And I think maybe now is a good point to address one of the very few complaints we get on this show, which is that we perhaps shyly don't talk enough about what Supersede does in this domain, right? And people actually sometimes think we're just podcasters and that's our main role in life. But no, actually there is a software company here that solves many of the problems that we've talked about on today's episode, specifically for clients like those we've talked about on today's episode. So maybe in the couple of minutes that we've got left, we could just quickly elucidate what are these products that we sell and how could these software solutions support a small cedent?
Yeah, well, Supersede obviously is the software company.
Making it super to seed.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, Ben's brainchild on the name, which is absolutely brilliant. But you're right. There's two major areas that we support the cedents in. The first is the data cleansing piece. And we have both large and small clients there, but the small clients being able to very quickly bring their data in and have that organized and structured so that submission pack work that gets presented is done by them very, very easily. And it's one of those things where even for our clients who don't buy a ton of reinsurance, you don't have to buy hundreds of treaties a year to want to have that software, because it allows you to, for the half dozen programs that you buy, to send all the data in there, to have a sense check as to how it's been organized, to sort of play around and move that data around and give it to your brokers in a way that's already prepared and polished and clean, and it makes sense. Because the other thing that it's unlocking for the smaller clients that we have is deeper partnerships with their brokers. Right? This is a fundamental piece. It's saying to the broker, I'm not going to sort of offload the janitorial tasks to you. I'm just saying, here's all of our stuff organized and ready for you. I want to think about these growth goals that we have, and the broker is far better suited to evaluate your objectives and how you best utilize reinsurance as capital, how you structure access to new products, and how you build data sets that tell that story to the reinsurers. The brokers are exceptional at that. And if you let them go out and just say, rinse and repeat last year's renewal, but spend all of your time sorting my data out, you're leaving a huge amount of value on the table. And that's the thing that we see the most from our smaller cedents, is how they see that. The other thing that we do is we have a deals platform that allows the cedents to track all their reinsurance purchasing and flow that data back to their internal accounting systems or to third-party accounting systems, and allow them to sort of very easily keep track of what reinsurance have they bought, where does it sit, where are all the documents, who's on all those contracts, in a way it's good cleanliness. It's not going to the broker, how many deals do we have with partnery, right? You should have a little bit of a sense check as to where that is, and it gives the cedent the ability to say, here's what we bought, here is why. When they're talking to their leadership and the board internally, they're saying, this is what our reinsurance strategy is, and here's what we're buying as a result of that strategy. So it's giving them a way to manage everything as in their reinsurance life that historically has only been reserved for the top 5% of insurance companies in the world. And that's central to how we think about the way the future of reinsurance goes. right? It's how do we allow smaller insurance companies around the world to more effectively work with their partners, unlock capital, so they can provide value to the end consumers, right? Again, maybe our bigger insurance friends won't like it as much, but I think there's a huge amount of value in smaller insurance companies across the world, small regionals and bureaus and markets that don't have the appetite for the tier one insurance company.
No, but the good news is that if they do use Supersede to structure all their data and manage all their deals, then when bigger insurers acquire them, they neatly fit into the way they've organized all their data.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jared. You just did an excellent job. And I realize that we're
almost out of time. So if this is something that relates and you empathize with, I have these problems. Our website, supersede.com, CEDE, as you'd probably assume from Ben's earlier comment. We've got forms that you can fill out to get more insight and download our white papers and case studies. You can sign up for getting demos booked in. There's tons of additional resources there, so you too can understand what value might we be able to sort of provide to you in your business as you think about reinsurance as a form of value as a small cedent.
We've also put out a call to people who want to come on this show or nominate people to come on this show to share what matters to them in the magical mystery world of reinsurance. So please don't hesitate to sign up if you would like to be a part of the podcast in any way.
Looks forward to it. Thank you, everyone.
Where is that form? Where is that form? It's on LinkedIn. I've seen it on LinkedIn and on the website, I'm guessing, or somewhere else. In the show notes. That form you can find in the show notes to sign up yourself, your friends, your enemies, anybody you like.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Reinsurance Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, preferably 5 stars. For more insights and updates, follow us on LinkedIn and visit our website at supersede.com/podcasts. You'll find the links in the show notes.